Now I want to take a segment of this Monday's podcast to talk about fantasy football and the fantasy teams I've drafted this year, along with what to watch out for in particular. I'll be doing this every Monday throughout the rest of the fantasy season in order to keep you updated on what you should do to ensure the top spot in your fantasy league. In this year's fantasy season, I decided to participate in 2 high-stake leagues, meaning there's money at stake, one 8-team league and one 16-player league. For the 8-team league, I had the number 1 overall pick, and as you may have expected, I chose Christian McCaffrey. McCaffrey is a fantasy football prodigy, and not choosing him would be like not taking Tom Brady in a redraft of the 2000 draft class, or not taking Patrick Mahomes in a redraft of 2017. It's a no-brainer. I picked up Josh Jacobs with the 2nd-round pick, and a quickly developing running back who will likely be top 5 in fantasy production this season is now on my team. The rest of my roster reads off as follows. At quarterback, I'm starting Aaron Rodgers. At running back, Christian McCaffrey and Josh Jacobs. At wide receiver, Juju Smith-Schuster, Tyreek Hill, and Amari Cooper. At tight end, Gronk. At defense, the Colts. At kicker, Will Lutz, and Amari Cooper is my flex. On the bench, I've got Dak Prescott, Kerryon Johnson, Terry McLaurin, Jerry Jeudy, Deshaun Jackson, Noah Fant, the Chargers defense, and that's just about it. Now, my lineup in this 8-team league is based on a mix of guaranteed production and diamonds in the rough. For my starting lineup, I focused on players that I can count on if my bench players don't show up. Throughout the first week or two while the league shapes itself out, now that's not a breakthrough. I'm just picking players that I can count on to put up points as long as they're not injured. They're players that I know are going to consistently catch passes and consistently get snaps. Now, the flip side of my roster is where you can take your fantasy football skills to the next level, especially in an 8-team league. Solid 8 to 9 point players are readily available in free agency, so you don't need to worry about having a backup kicker for a week 8 bye, or even a backup receiver. If worst comes to worst, solid starters are available. If it comes to week bye and you don't have a great receiver, pick one up. In an 8-team league, there's going to be receivers available. Now, the key in an 8-team league is finding who will perform best when nobody else expects it. So instead of preparing for a game 6 or 7 weeks away, chain down the dull stones. Players that have the potential and have proven that they have the potential to be top 10 in their respective position, yet have not reached that point. My bench wide receivers show it. I've got Terry McLaurin, a second-year player with not much of a quarterback or even a team name. Playing for the Washington football team, along with his lack of experience, would hold many within an 8 to 10 team league from even spending a draft pick on him. Yet, McLaurin faced this last season and outperformed everyone else on the Redskins' 2019 roster. McLaurin led the team in receiving yards with 919, along with 7 touchdowns. He caught those passes from a total of 3 quarterbacks throughout the season. So yes, McLaurin has faced this problem before and shined. Yet, what makes this even better is the fact that Haskins is in his 2nd season and has been declared the starter. Now, this doesn't show a whole ton, but what it does give us is a little more sense of quarterback security in terms of quality. Basically meaning, we can be a little more optimistic on the topic of Washington quarterback play quality. Even so, the rookie wide receiver put up over 900 yards and 7 touchdowns without a solid leader at quarterback last year. So, if it happens again, it's not the worst thing in the world for a fantasy owner. The rest of the offense didn't come close to playing as well as McLaurin did without a solid quarterback. Given a year of development, McLaurin could possibly be a top 10 receiver in fantasy football even without a solid quarterback position. In fact, I could very well see McLaurin putting up over 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns. Now, is this a bit of a stretch? This is the kicker. Is this a bit of a stretch? Yes, it is. But that's the point. It's an 8 to 10 team league, and there is a solid starter talent available. I can pick up Danny Amendola. I can pick up a receiver who I know is going to put up 7 to 9 points, pretty much guaranteed on a week-to-week basis. But what you want to make sure you snatch onto before they break out are players that will show their stardom this season. Terry McLaurin, Deshaun Jackson, and Jerry Jeudy are all candidates for that description. Deshaun Jackson put up monster fantasy numbers with over 150 receiving yards in Week 1 last season, but never showed back up, as he was out with an injury for practically the entire season following. These players are wild cards, and we don't know if they're going to be a boom or a bust. But grab onto them when the stakes are low, and don't start them until they boom. The next thing I want to talk about is defenses. Defenses are severely underrated in fantasy football. And the casual player often forgets a loophole that can guide you to a win riding defensive points. Look at the schedule. For example, the Colts have a right down the middle schedule in terms of difficulty, yet I have them starting for week 1. Why do I have them starting in week 1? It's not because of how easy their schedule is in the long run. It's because they're playing the Jags in week 1. In week 2, I'll probably pick up a defense that is either playing the Jags, Bengals, or Washington. And I'll attempt to do that every single week this season because even though the 49ers have a strong defense, arguably the strongest in the league, if the Colts are playing the Jags and the 49ers are going to play the Chiefs, you'd want to put your money on the Colts defense to put up more fantasy points. You have to think of defense less as a single starter and more of a matchup-based week-to-week filter. It makes no sense to start a defense that is going to play against the Chiefs or the Seahawks or even the 49ers. The 49ers have a solid offense. You pick the defense that is playing the worst team but is still a solid defense. And granted, you never want to have the Washington football team defense, even if they're playing a bad team. They are so bad. The Washington football team is so bad that you run the risk of them letting the Bengals put up 35 points on them. So don't do that. But what I'm saying is take those middle-of-the-road defenses and find which ones are playing the easiest matchups and put your chips down on them to start for your team. That's what you got to do. That's how you get those easy points out of the defensive position. Like I said, it's such an underrated position. I didn't do that last year, and it hurt me in the long run. And also, another thing, it hurt one of the top players in the 16-team league that I was playing in last year. He had the Patriots defense starting all season because through the first 8 games, they were money. But when I played him, he lost because the Patriots defense flopped against the Ravens. The first really good team they were playing, the Ravens, they completely flopped. And that's why he lost, because his defense put up close to 0 points. And his team had been riding on his defense up to that point, and he was almost undefeated up to that point. But I was able to beat him, because my defense outplayed his. My defense was playing the Bengals that week. His defense was playing the Ravens. It's a simple thing, but a lot of times you don't pay attention to it, because with a receiver or a running back or a tight end, you don't often pay a whole ton of attention as to who they're playing, unless it's like a difference between they're playing the number 2 defense in the league or the number 28 defense in the league. But it's the very small matchups that you gotta pay attention to. Defense is underrated. Pay attention to it. Put your chips down on the defense that is playing the worst offense that week that is available. Now, for my 16-team league, I'm going to go through the starting lineup here. Patrick Mahomes at quarterback, Christian McCaffrey and Devin Singletary at running back, Keenan Allen and Chris Godwin at wide receiver, Evan Ingram at tight end, John Brown as my flex. He's a wide receiver for the Bills, if you didn't know. Matt Prater as my kicker, and the Chargers defense. Why do I have the Chargers defense on? You guessed it. They are playing a bad team. They are playing the Bengals. Granted, Joe Burrow. Now, here's the thing, all right? I have the Rams defense as my backup defense. I'm probably not going to start the Rams because they play the Cowboys, but it's an interesting thing here. I'm a little worried about the Chargers defense going up against Joe Burrow because that's kind of a wild card, but the Bengals team has just been so historically bad that it's just really hard for me not to start the Chargers defense here. I honestly don't think that Joe Burrow is going to shine in his first career NFL game. It's possible, but he's never even been backup for an NFL game. So it's hard for me to say that I'm not going to start that Chargers defense. But for now, Chargers defense starting week 1. On my bench, I've got Tom Brady, Marlon Mack, Marvin Jones, Jonnu Smith, who's a tight end for the Titans, and Chris Conley, wide receiver with the Jacksonville Jaguars. I actually picked up Chris Conley just before recording this podcast, and I've got the Rams defense. Now, I picked up Chris Conley mainly because he's kind of another wild card player. The Jags don't have a great team. But Gardner Minshew has been shown to be a solid quarterback, and he could be the future for the Jacksonville Jaguars. We don't really know yet. Again, this is kind of a prove-it year for him just as much as it is for Trubisky. Now, granted, the Jacksonville Jaguars do not have a good team at all, so it's kind of an unfair prove-it year for him. That's kind of tough for him. But in the end, Chris Conley has a fair quarterback. But that's not really what I'm worried about. Last year, he had the same quarterback, and he put up solid fantasy numbers. He had, a good amount of 15-point weeks. But he also had a good amount of 0 to 5-point weeks. So he's kind of a wild card player, so can he take that to the next level and consistently put up, 7 or more point weeks every single week? If he does that, I might move him into my flex above John Brown if John Brown isn't playing as well as that. You never know. But again, Chris Conley is one of those wild card players that you kind of just grab onto and you say, look, he might boom. Same with Marlon Mack. Marlon Mack has a lot of running back competition this year. He does. And he might get beat out midway through the season, but if Marlon Mack, using this competition as inspiration, rides on that and improves his game and becomes a top 10 running back, then I could very well put him in the starting spot above Devin Singletary. Same with Jonnu Smith. Now, Jonnu Smith, I'd probably have to bet money on that he's not going to play better than Evan Ingram, but it's definitely a possibility. And then you've got Marvin Jones, wide receiver with the Detroit Lions. A lot of people, surprisingly this year, have the Detroit Lions as kind of a sleeper team to have one of those, 7-9 or 9-7 records and maybe even be in the hunt for the playoffs. Now, I feel like the Lions have been a sleeper team for a long time, mainly just because of Matt Stafford. But you never know. So I have him on my team. He might end up performing really well this year. It's really hard to tell with these players. It's not 100% yes, but it's not 100% no. But people tend to lean towards no, and that's why you pick them up and you put them on your bench. That's why you don't start them. And then I've got Tom Brady, which is... I pick up Tom Brady because I know he's going to be a good backup for the week that Patrick Mahomes is out, because I don't think that Tom Brady this year is going to play better than Patrick Mahomes, but you never know. I mean, Tom Brady, the last time he had an offense this good, put up MVP numbers, put up career highs, and broke the touchdown record at the time with 50. So, I mean, Tom Brady could very well put up better numbers than Patrick Mahomes this season. I doubt it, but it's a real possibility, and if he does start doing that, then I'll put him at starting quarterback. But again, my point is, pretty much every player on my bench, both in my 16-team league and my 8-team league, are wild cards. They're wild card players. You don't know if they're going to do great, and you don't know if they're going to do terrible. But the point is, it's a wild card. It's a 50-50. Not even 50-50, maybe 30-70. 30% they're going to do great. 70% they're going to be or worse. So again, you just don't know. But the point is, what I'm trying to... I know I've kind of ran around this in circles, but what I'm trying to kind of plant into your mind here is that you've got to stop looking at your bench as players that are meant for bye weeks. They're not. In an 8 to 10 team league especially, I mean, in the 16-player league, of course, I'm going to try to have one for every position besides kicker. Kickers are always going to be available. Even in a 16-team league, there's still going to be another 16 starting kickers I can use. But in a 16-team league, you noticed I have everything except for kicker covered in the backup. And I'm always going to do that, just to make sure I always have one that I know is at least going to put up some amount of points. I know that Jonnu Smith, Marvin Jones, Marlon Mack, Tom Brady, and the Rams defense are always going to put up some amount of points and aren't going to absolutely, crap on my team that week. I know that. So I have them in there. But again, they're not players that I'm not trying to get the best player on the board in terms of projection. I'm trying to get the best player on the board in terms of ceiling. It's ceiling versus projection. Projections are really mistelling because they go off of what the player has already done, right? They go off of what the player has done in the past, but the ceiling is what you want to pay closer attention to if you're looking at your bench. Again, even in a 16-player league, granted, you want to get backups for every position because, players are a little more tight in terms of availability in a league like that. But even so, when you do get those players for your bench, get players that have high ceilings that could really turn the tables this year. That would, at the end of this season, if we knew what they were going to do at the end of the season, that could possibly be an outcome that would give them the status of a 3rd or 4th round draft pick next season, So, again, it's just ceiling versus projection. It's those two things, ceiling against projection. Now we're coming close to the end here. I hope I covered that well for you guys. I'm excited for fantasy football this season, honestly, more than ever. I've got $600 at stake. I didn't spend $600. Don't worry, I'm not that stupid. But I could possibly win $600. And actually, interestingly enough, I got an email from the NFL, not the NFL actually, but the NFL Fantasy app saying that in my 16-team league, I am projected to win with an 11-2 overall projected record. Now, granted, projected is really misleading because they don't really know all the time. They're just going off of what they've already done in the past. So if every player in the league doesn't improve or fall off a cliff, then yeah, I will go 11-2. But overall, it's good. I'm projected to win, which is a great spot to be in. You don't want to be projected to go 0-14, But again, projections are misleading, so you never know.